Hello, how's your year been? I hope you've had a good year. How's teaching going? I hope over the last year you feel like you've made some progress. Maybe you've tried some new things that you've been thinking about for some time. And I hope that you feel ready to start the new teaching year. And of course, more importantly, therefore, how are you? Are you feeling well? Are you feeling like you're well prepared to start the new teaching year? Do you feel you've got some time to make sure that you're in the right place to do that? Maybe even you've had a holiday to help prepare. And yes, I really did say more importantly, how are you? Because the question of how you are is, of course, absolutely crucial to those other questions of how's your piano teaching going? How's your year going? You have to make sure that you are doing well yourself and taking that time. One of my favorite quotations about playing the piano comes allegedly from the pianist Claudio Arau. I say allegedly because it was told to me once, but I've never actually managed to verify it. I tried looking it up to see if it's genuine or not. It may not be genuine. If it's not genuine, I don't really care because it's wise words, but it's alleged that Claudio Arau was asked that dreaded question, how many hours a day do you teach? How many hours a day do you practice, rather? How many hours a day do you practice the piano? And he answered, allegedly, I practice the piano 24 hours a day because everything that I do affects the way that I play the piano. And that makes perfect sense, doesn't it, when you think about it? Everything that we do affects how we play the piano, how we approach music. Therefore, I guess it's our business to make sure that the rest of our lives are all preparing us well for playing the piano, that we're in a really good place when we approach the piano, that they all affect for the best the way that we approach the piano and the way that we approach our teaching. As we go away and take those moments to pause and have a break and maybe have a holiday, I'll tell you more about my holiday in a moment. We often use those rather strange metaphors. I need to switch off for a bit. I need to recharge my batteries. I need to unwind, which is, I think we've probably all been guilty of saying these kinds of things, but it's really unhealthy when you think about it, isn't it? To think that we need to switch off or recharge our batteries. And it really shows the extent to which we think of ourselves, don't we, as machines or devices that need to be switched off sometime. They need the power turning off, or they need the batteries recharging, or even worse, to say we need to unwind, like we're a coiled up spring that's just ready to to unwind and burst into action. So we need to unwind and take that tension away, just like a metronome. In fact, I didn't come on holiday to think of myself as a blooming metronome. These are really unhealthy ways to think, because as human beings we're so much more complex than that, and we're so much more human than that. And to think of ourselves approaching our work as these little machines going into our work really doesn't help us prepare ourselves very well. And often what we do need, I think, is to find some sense of connection. And whether it's by taking some time away or just in those moments of the day that we can find, to find a connection again with ourselves and to reconnect with our sense of what it is to be human and the human side of what we do, our sleep, our rest time, our time doing other things, our time preparing ourselves for our teaching and preparing ourselves for music, maybe even just times listening to music and enjoying it and reconnecting with the reason we started doing this job in the first place. And Oliver Berkman, the writer, talks about actually one of the things that we can do to be very healthy is to find a stillness. He says a stillness away from the ticking clock. I love that, a stillness away from the ticking clock. Because as piano teachers, of course, we're always aware of that ticking clock, aren't we? We're, most of us, paid by that ticking clock. We're paid by the half hour or the hour, and we're always aware of it ticking away, that we have to wrap up on time. And often that doesn't help us to think of ourselves in that full way that we need to approach healthily. We start to think of ourselves as machines as we approach our teaching. So that stillness where we just have time to think about how we're going to approach our work, how we're going to approach the music that we're teaching, and make sure that we're in the right place and not approaching that work as a piece of machinery. So this is my holiday, this is my time away. Welcome to the Isle of Mull off the west coast of Scotland, where I'm a very regular visitor. We came here last week. We sailed on the ferry from Oban off the west coast of Scotland. And up on the hill, as you come out on the ferry, there's Dunolly Castle, which is there, a 13th century castle. And it's sitting up there that Mendelssohn composed the opening bars of his Hebrides overture. He's often thought of as the Fingal's Cave overture. But this is a letter from August, I think it's the August the 7th of that year, 1829, that he writes on the letter that how much the Hebrides had impressed him. And the following music came to mind, and he writes along this letter the first 21 bars of the Hebrides Overture, and so on. And a lot of people think that this is composed when he was at Fingal's Cave. Fingal's Cave, incidentally, is just, where is it? It's just there. That's this is the Isle of Staffa, and Fingal's Cave itself is just on this side of the Isle of Staffa, where he visited on a rowing boat. But he didn't visit there until the next day, because as he's writing this letter, actually he draws a picture on the other side. He's a very good sketcher, actually, of pictures, Mendelssohn. And he draws a picture of where he was, and we know that he was sitting up on that hillside next to Dunolly Castle, and you can actually see the Isle of Mull in the distance on that picture. I love stories like this because it helps us to feel that sense of the connection with the music that we're playing, that we are inhabiting the same world and having actually the same experiences that so many of these composers had. And I really like that idea that as we travel, we can search out places or find places which are either the actual places that composers visited or are similar, and actually just give us that same sort of environment to reflect on, might be a natural environment or an urban environment if we're playing particularly urban music, but to feel that great sense of the human connection. So that's, I think, a really important thing for us to think about, to find time for those moments of connection, both with ourselves and to use that sense of humanity to connect with the music that we're preparing, so that when we go back in, those lessons don't feel like we're just going in like a little machine on autopilot, but actually we're connecting with ourselves and with our deeper sense of human experience as we teach that music. It's a wonderful way to think about our teaching, I think. And another thing that we can do, the second point that I want to discuss, is the importance of finding moments of silence away from the sounds that inhabit our everyday world. And as music teachers, we're well aware of this. There was a really good article in New Scientist magazine earlier this month. I am a subscriber. An article about the importance of silence and actually the healthiness of silence and how we can use silence in our everyday health. It's known, of course, that sound, if it's unexpected, can cause us a great deal of a physical reaction. Your blood pressure can rise. You can have quite a fright from unexpected sounds. And sounds, we might hope, are not so unexpected in music lessons, but we have that clear physiological connection with all sound as human beings. And finding those moments of silence is really important if we can make that time. But the article says, actually, true silence is not healthy for us. You think of John Cage's 4 minutes 33 seconds, which is, of course, the ultimate listening exercise as we listen to the sounds that happen around us. But John Cage visited, in his research, an anechoic chamber, a chamber which is absolutely closed to all outside sounds. So you hear in there total silence, absolute silence. It's a very unhealthy thing to do. Most people can only bear it for about 15 minutes and then they need to get out. They start to go a little bit crazy. John Cage said it was so quiet he could hear the blood rushing through his veins. A lot of people talk about it's so quiet they can hear themselves blinking, and it's actually quite unhealthy for you. But the science, according to New Scientist, says that actually as we find healthy moments of silence, we should be contemplating other sounds, and that can be sounds of a natural environment. Something like, either if you're lucky enough the sea lapping up the shore in the background, or even just sitting out in the garden, listening to the birds, walking down the street and listening to the wind in your ears. And that sort of silence where there's something actually happening, but we're not actually listening actively to those sounds. We're just contemplating natural sounds. And that's really, really healthy for us. Toru Takemitsu, the great Japanese composer, wrote his book of essays about his music. He called it Confronting Silence, and he said he wanted the music he composes to be the kind of music that confronts silence and it meets silence. And I think that's a really nice way to think about, as we approach music, that it comes from that silence and it makes a healthy connection with the rest of our lives, and it bursts in on the world almost like a surprise, but also it meets the silence of our lives at the same time. There's a great initiative in London at the moment to make London a quieter place. There was a survey done in 2004 that concluded London's far too noisy a place, and lots of things have been done since to make the noise levels quieter on the streets with the kind of road surfaces that they use and all sorts of other urban sounds. But it reminded me actually of Haydn. And another story, those sort of blue plaque stories, as you can go around London and visiting these blue plaques and finding places that we share our lives with composers. Either Haydn's house you can go and visit, Handel's house. Handel, of course, lived famously next to Jimi Hendrix next door, and so you can go and see the blue plaques there. And you can go and visit the house where Haydn stayed from 1791. And Haydn, when he arrived in London, actually wrote back to Vienna and said, "It is much too loud a city. I can't hear enough silence in order to be able to compose." And he badly wanted to get back to Vienna to experience that. For him, it was just too loud. But my favourite place to visit in London for that sense of sharing a connection with the composer is the place actually where Mendelssohn found his silence. And you can find this in the Barbican. It's actually upstairs outside in the Barbican. You don't need to go inside. It's just on the walkway on the upper level. And part of a beech tree from Buckinghamshire that blew down in the 2005 gales, the storm. But it's the beech tree which it's said that Mendelssohn particularly loved sitting under when he was visiting London, and he was in the area and often working quite hard and actively as a musician. And he would go to the woods and sit beneath this beech tree and find his silence there. And we all need these places of silence. We all need these moments in our lives, these moments of stillness. And I think as we approach the new teaching year, it's really good to think about, are we having enough time away from the ticking clock to think of ourselves? Are there places that we can actually create those moments in the teaching week to find our silence, reconnect with ourselves and teach in a way which really makes us hungry to teach? Good luck this year. I hope you can find those moments for yourself, and I hope your teaching goes well. Bye for now.